It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, March 31st. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is really not sure what to make of that game versus Ottawa. 11 shots on goal in the entire game.
It's just craziness. All of this is craziness. It's all madness.
Yeah, we are going to get into that game. We are going to talk a little NHLPA, Flyers jerseys, plus preview the two weekend matchups all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Flyers. That is where we post about Flyers news and our latest episodes. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail. Subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, Russ, we did go back to the 12-6 in this game. So there's that, right?
Yeah, we did talk about this being a high scoring game, and there was that, and we talked about it being testy and physical, and there was that. What we didn't talk about was just the slop that was the Flyers offense for most of the game. And then they just, they got some goals late and made it close.
Yeah, I really felt like we had 3 different games that happened, during this one, where the first period was your basic Flyers getting really outplayed, but holding the other team off somehow, Ottawa only with 1 goal in that first period. Second period was like Royal Rumble out there,
It was.
and then the third game was a little bit more of a skill game and the pace picked up. So I just felt like each period had its own distinct feel to it.
No, that's a good way of calling it. I mean, it did. I think Cam Talbot may want a goal or two back, but hey, the Flyers didn't give up. But the fact that they didn't give up and get a point in this puts them closer to pushing Detroit out of like that 8th spot for the draft. And they get like 3 or 4 more points, and they're going to be in a spot. They may pat themselves on the back for not giving up at the end of the year, but then there's going to be half of the fan base and probably some people inside saying, what did we do at the end of the season? Now we're that much further away from Connor Bedard and maybe a franchise player in this draft. I mean, what do you want more? That's we could probably do a whole episode on that. Which is more important? I could tell you right now which it is, but I'll save that.
Yeah, it's really tough because, these guys, they have a lot of pride
Mhm.
and they want to do the best they can, especially the younger guys who have a lot to prove,
Mhm.
I think, and some of the vets who may be with the Flyers or may be looking for contracts elsewhere. So there actually is a lot of individual incentive for these guys. And so I get why they're working so hard to get back into it. Another reason why this game was upside down. So the Flyers only got 11 shots on goal, right?
Yeah.
5 of those 11 shots were on the power play. Power play was 2 for 2 in this game.
Miraculously, yeah.
And yet, it just felt so like we're in the upside down here.
Yeah, I mean, there were some good individual efforts. Morgan Frost, like we've been talking about him for over a month, for the good play he's been playing away from the puck and everything else. That was good. Cam York got a nice goal. That was good for him. He needed that, but boy, did he get crunched by Austin Watson. I mean, that's something
Yeah.
where I hope that's not a lingering thing. He came back, so he showed toughness, but boy,
And
he
scored
really
that goal. So,
yeah, the goal was nice. I feel bad for Derek Brassard. That may be his last game.
uh,
Like we might not see him again, and this is it. Like he's going to be hanging it up after this year, I hear. So um, we'll see. I mean, he's had a nice career if he does decide to hang it up, but just would be tough if he went out like that. So hopefully he gets to play another game. Uh, Felix Sandstrom, he was worn out. Like I mean, let's face it. I
yeah.
mean, any goalie that would have faced that barrage was going to be worn out. I mean, I saw so many breakaways, right? He saw too many breakaways. Claude Giroux had a nice goal. Tyler Clevin, a rookie, gets his first assist in his first game. Just so many things happened in this game, and it's just again, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it head scratching. The coach isn't even behind the bench. Fine, he's upstairs watching this game. Uh, Nothing was normal about this game.
No, and the fact that Ottawa had 20 high danger chances in this game is pretty, and only had 4 goals. I mean, if you
Right,
consider
that's what
that
Stetson
many.
had a good game, even though he gave up this amount of goals.
Yeah. And so, obviously the play in overtime was not great, but you could see the exhaustion
Mental
and
fatigue. That's what I thought that was.
yeah, yeah, I think so too. But I'm not going to really put this game on him,
No,
um, especially given how the team played in front of him in terms of allowing so many shots. But
and I'm
yeah,
cringing now with Joel Farabee fighting. I mean, knowing what he's been
it's
through.
so yeah. It just makes me so uncomfortable when he
Yeah,
fights. Like, I appreciate the spirit of it, but
yeah,
given the injury, like, what are you doing, Joel?
yeah.
Like, and fighting to brink it. Like, what?
Oh, and who knew DeBrincat could fight like that? I've covered this guy's
I
whole career.
know.
Boy, he was
I
feisty
know.
and got some punches in, but then you're like worried about Farabee because you're like, if you take a couple to the neck, that's not good. But
No, not at
whatever.
all. Yeah, that second period was, I don't even know,
It was a gong show.
obviously. Yeah, and obviously, as we've talked about, there's never gonna be a game again like that old-timey
No,
Flyers
it was
Sens
close.
game.
This had the spirit of it.
Yeah, it really did,
Guys were kicked out. Delorier
mhm.
fought twice. And he didn't even get to the bench and he fought twice.
Yeah, 74 penalty minutes in total in this one, including the game misconducts that happened, and yeah, it's really interesting because after all of that, the second period still was not great for the Flyers,
No, I
and
mean, if you think about
it
it,
didn't like, they didn't get any pick me up from those fights. It really like, they didn't show up until the 3rd period.
yeah, I mean, Trump had more indictments than the Flyers had shots on goal.
Oh, Russ. Too
Just
is
saying.
it too soon? Oh, man.
More charges.
Oh, god. Oh, good times, good times. But I think, as far as the Flyers go, you're right. It's a really difficult situation this team is in terms of getting these additional points. Now it's 7 straight games with points for the Flyers, and it's really tough because you want this team to be able to reset and rebuild effectively, and winning games is good for that, but also not so good for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm here for some wins, but I feel like they're just getting too many points, and again,
They
I
are
don't
because,
blame
I mean,
them.
if you look at the
I don't
team,
blame
right?
them for trying.
No, no, no. I don't ever blame anybody for trying. And it's up to the GM, coach, or whatever to devise a strategy. And that's why we say that should have probably happened in January. But the basic point on this is this team needs big time players. And it's not like this team's a player or two away. If this team was a player or two away and they were just going to finish the season strong, I'd be like, hey, that's fine. That's great. But they need much more than that.
Yeah, they really do. I don't know, man. Well, we will see what happens with the Flyers for the remainder of the season. We've got 2 games to preview later in the show, but coming up next, we are going to talk about the new NHLPA boss, Marty Walsh, some potential new jerseys for the Flyers, and Artem Anisimov.
The tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get in the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to fanduel.com/locked on and sign up today to claim your no sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to fanduel.com/locked on to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel.
All right, Russ. So a few separate bits of news that we are going to get to in this segment. First off, Marty Walsh, who is the new executive director of the NHL Players Association, who was named a few months ago, I think, but is taking over now. He was the former Secretary of Labor in the Biden administration and left that role to come to the NHLPA. And, he goes back to Massachusetts politics and is a big union and labor organizer.
Yeah.
So this seems a natural fit to him. Had his first conference with the media. What did you take away from it?
Yeah, I was on there. I thought that he was pretty effective. I think his head's in the right place to help the players. I think the fact that he was a mayor of Boston does help him with kind of like dealing with sports teams a little bit at least, and getting his feet wet with that. I think dealing with unions, he's really effective with and also familiar with. I also think that I like the fresh set of eyes look, and I liked we'll go through some of the bullet points, but he had some some interesting things to say, even only being there a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think so too. The first thing that jumped out at me is that he really wants that World Cup of hockey back. And, much like we talked about, I think it was last week after the World Baseball Classic, he really loved that. He's a baseball guy
Yeah.
too, and, wants that environment back. We know it can't happen until I think 2 years from now or later, just because of the lead up time it would take. And I think he's also interested in getting the NHL players back in the Olympics if there's a way to do it that makes sense. And so I appreciate that aspect of what he had to say. I also,
Well, actually, just to get into the World Cup of Hockey one step further, uh, he just doesn't want to talk about it in the ether. He wants it to start being written out and followed. And I thought that was interesting that he said that, because it's true. All we've been hearing is just like sound bites and thoughts, and he wants it down on paper, and I don't blame him.
yeah, and as well as it being a regular thing, like on
Right.
paper for perpetuity and not just a
Yeah.
one-off that's
Right.
negotiated over and over again. And
Or
and I think
used
that
as
makes a
a
lot of sense.
bargaining chip in negotiation.
Mhm.
It really shouldn't be.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I thought was good, and in terms of the timing of him joining the organization now, is that the CBA doesn't expire until 2026. So this
Right.
gives him a huge runway, A, to get acclimated with the league and really understand what's going on with the players and develop all the relationships that he needs to in order to effectively negotiate that new CBA, and then maybe, take these things like the World Cup of Hockey and incorporate them into that negotiation.
Yeah, he's a cap neophyte right now, and he admitted that, but he also is listening to his constituency, which is good. He should. That's if all the players are speaking freely. Like sometimes they don't get a full, whatever it is, 700 whatever players. They don't sometimes get that. Sometimes it's just a sampling. So it's interesting to see, how many of them are really going to voice their opinion, because some just don't bother. They just go play hockey. And so that's
Right.
that's what you kind of wonder how that part will work.
Yeah, and James Van Riemsdyk was part of the hiring process,
Hmm.
as well as he's been part of the initial communications with Marty Walsh. So there is significant Flyers representation for now on that committee, that
Well, at least
central
for a few
committee
more
of the
weeks.
players. Yeah, yeah, but I do think that he'll pass that off.
He will.
I believe it's Scott Lawton who's the
Yeah, I think
alternate.
Lawton is the next one.
So, I do, believe in Scott Lawton as a leader, as I have said on this show
Yep,
this
me too.
week.
I'm there with you
So I think he'll make a good union rep, as
for sure.
well. And he did mention the ongoing issue of the Pride Nights and the jerseys, and
Mhm.
he wants to, and rightfully so, I think, be supportive of the individual players in the union because that's part of the job, right? But also recognize that the league has a lot of work to do to be more
Right.
inclusive, which is also very true. So,
Yeah, he
uh,
did say he
well,
wanted to, talk to Bettman about that. I thought the biggest
mhm,
thing that he mentioned was at first when asked about the salary cap, he's like, "Yeah, I'm open to everything for that." He paused for a second and said, "Except the escrow. We are not willing to
right,
change the escrow." So that all of a sudden kicked in, probably because it had been talked about to him, and that's going to be an issue because the problem is if the escrow has to get paid back first, well, then you're not seeing a rise in the cap. And if you're not seeing a rise in the cap, you're not seeing free agents getting signed. That's the yin and the yang of it. I get that the players kind of want their money, because it's their money, but you're also going
mhm,
to be hindering other players. Like players who are free agents this year could really be screwed.
yeah. And finally, on a more humorous note, Ever the politician, and with his Boston background as mayor of Boston, he was asked specifically about the Frozen Four and rooting for Boston University when he's a BC guy, and he's like, "No, I'll root for Boston University," which to many is a no go. But
I know that's a sin, right? Yeah.
as mayor, he had to learn to, straddle both sides of
Yeah.
that fence in hockey. I just thought that was funny.
No, hey, listen, that's the answer he has to give. I get it.
I know, I know. Switching gears a little bit, sportslogos.net noted that the Flyers could be getting new jerseys next year, a new design that's more of a throwback that I
Mhm.
thought was really interesting, and I'm intrigued by it. And as we know, in more recent decades, the Flyers orange changed a little bit to be
Yeah.
more of a red orange, and this would go back to the original, more you know solid orange on the color wheel that the team had from the beginning, and like remove some of the piping and make the stripes look more like they did in the 80s and 90s, and
As
I
long
am
as I
here
can
for
read
it.
the names on the back, that's really all I care about.
Yeah, yeah,
Like those black ones are just murder on a
they
Saturday. It's
are.
like, ugh, they're
Yeah,
brutal.
as long as like the contrast and the numbers have the outlines
Right.
on the shoulders so that you can really see it,
And we're good.
um
But I
then
do
yeah,
like that
then we're
orange
good.
better. I admit that.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a much, much better orange to go with. And I do like, the more plain stripes with
Mhm.
just a solid sleeve with the black toward the gloves. I'm like that. So hopefully we'll get that. And that's, aside from the Fanatics thing, this is gonna still be in the Adidas era. So
But remember,
uh
folks, you can't order one with a C on it for next year. Just tell
that is true. And another bit that we thought was interesting, Daily Faceoff had an article about Artem Anisimov's role with
them.
the Phantoms, and we've talked about him that he, by all information that we have, actively chose to stay with the Phantoms this year
Yeah.
and take on a leadership role there without an NHL contract. And that was a surprise to a lot of people, and like I said, we've been talking about that, since he took that contract, and there's maybe some rumblings that this could be leading toward him, taking on a player development role when he retires from the game. And I think that I don't hate the idea. I think, I'm very hesitant of a lot more Flyers alumni doing this. I mean, we do already have a ton of Flyers alumni in the organization in player development, and I want some more outside voices. But at the same time, Anisimov, the bulk of his career was not with the Flyers.
Right.
And I think playing as a veteran at the AHL level as opposed to the NHL level, I think has taught him more about what player development is in the minor leagues in a way that like Nick Schultz wouldn't have experienced, right?
Yeah,
That
I
the
agree.
kind of, the kind of mentorship he's doing in Lehigh Valley is a different animal.
It is. I personally like him. I spoke to him a lot earlier in his career when he's with the Rangers, and when he would come play here, I would always interview him. But it's been a few years now since he's been gone. I haven't really interviewed him in a while, but I've always liked him, liked his personality, liked his work ethic, always his honesty. So yeah, it wouldn't bother me at all.
Yeah, I think so too. Um, Looking forward to seeing if he returns to the Phantoms next year as a player or gets a two-way contract.
Right.
That's one of the off-season questions we will be digging into. This weekend, the Flyers have 2 games, and we are going to preview them coming up next. So the Flyers have back-to-back games against the Buffalo Sabres and Pittsburgh Penguins on Saturday and Sunday. And this should be an interesting set of games for the Flyers with very different consequences for the games. Obviously, the game against the Sabres is less consequential from a standings perspective. The Sabres, as we know,
No, they're not
are
out of
pretty
it though. Technically, they're not.
well.
I don't particularly
I
put them in
mean,
it, but if they were to win 7 in a row, they could get in playoffs. They could.
I guess they could, but I think for me, what I'm watching for in this game is Tage Thompson is at 44 goals with 9 games left as of recording, and can
Yeah.
he hit the 50 goal mark? I think it
I don't think
is.
he
I
will
don't
because of
know,
the
but
injury. When he came back the last time, before he had to take a game off from the injury, he looked a little rickety. So I don't know if he's going to get all that scoring touch back in time. So I'm going to vote against it, but I hope he does it.
yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it's a very small percentage that'll get it. But the thing is with Tage Thompson, he has the capability and has shown that he can have multi-goal games.
Yeah, I mean,
And
maybe
so
he'll score 5 goals against the
yeah.
Flyers.
Well, if he hits like one of them,
Right,
and gets a hat trick in one game, that
right.
just puts his chances up.
True.
So I'm definitely keeping
Depends
an
how
eye on
healthy he
him.
is. Yeah,
Yeah, for the rest of the season. The other thing I'm keeping an eye on is because the Sabres have the second worst penalty kill in the NHL, even worse than the Flyers, which says a lot. Their power play is good, it's seventh, but their PK is tragic. And so I'm hoping that maybe the Flyers can try out some power play, different setups with some of the different guys and find some success there.
yeah. I mean, I'm all for that. I mean, that could be a possibility and a way to get goals. So yeah, let's give it a shot. Put Sanheim back on there. I don't know about York though. Again, he's only got 1 goal on the season and a 3% shooting percentage. I think I might take him off the power play for a little while since he's not doing what everybody would hope he would, and put Sanheim there. Get D'Angelo back in there. That's fine. I mean, let's just go with that. Maybe even put Provorov back in there if you want. Any of those things are fine by me.
Yeah, I think so too. Um, yeah, I don't think we're going to get to see Devin Levi, who's getting
No,
his
we're
first
not.
NHL start in net on tonight versus the Rangers,
Right.
as they've had some injury issues
Although I'm
in net.
surprised. I would have started him against the Flyers because they don't generate as many shots as the Rangers, but they thought otherwise.
They did. Then on Sunday, the Flyers face the Pittsburgh Penguins. Both teams will be on the back half of a back-to-back that game. Now, the Pens are still in that wild card battle,
Yep.
and as of recording, they're in that second wild card spot, but only 1 point ahead of Florida with a game in hand. They're 5 points behind the Isles for that first wild card, but the Isles have 2 games in hand on them. So that seems unlikely that they would catch the
Yeah.
Islanders. And it's this Florida Pittsburgh battle for that
Yeah, that's the
last.
new battle. It was Florida and
Mhm.
the Islanders for a while. Now it's Florida and Pittsburgh. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. And we don't know the outcome of the Pens game against Nashville, who are in their own wild card battle going on in the Western
Yeah,
Conference.
I kind of
So
think they're
that's
safe.
gonna
I don't think they're real contenders for that one, but technically they're in.
Well, nonetheless, a difficult game.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
Yes.
so that could have an effect on things. And the first half of the back-to-back for the Flyers, it's the Sabres. For the Pens, it's the Bruins. And
Yeah. That's rough.
the Bruins have a decent chance of clinching the President's Trophy tonight. So it'll be more of a come down after that for their game against Pittsburgh. There's a small chance they won't clinch,
Yeah.
but a lot of
Maybe
crazy
Boston
things
will be
have to
hungover.
happen.
Yeah. Maybe they'll be hungover. You never know.
Yeah. So, but I do think the intensity of a game against the Bruins will tire them out a little bit uh, as far as the next day. So, a lot going on this weekend for the Flyers. And, it'll be April when we come back on Monday. So, not a lot left in the season. So, we're going to start kind of wrapping up the season next week in terms of what do we want out of these last few games that the Flyers have, and what are we doing heading into the off season.
I mean, you're always
And
looking for a sweet and merciful death. That's for sure.
yes. When they're officially eliminated, we'll have a celebration, or
Something.
I'm not sure if you call it a celebration.
It'll be something.
Yes, it will absolutely be something there. But yeah, so, and as a programming note for that, I'm attending the game in Pittsburgh. So, with all of that and logistics, we will have Monday's show for you in early Monday morning, as opposed to at midnight the night before.
Right.
And so stay tuned for that. That'll do it for today's show. Like I said, we will be back on Monday to recap the weekend's games and start getting into the last couple of weeks of this season. I am Rachel. I am on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for listening to the Locked On Flyers podcast. For your first listen, now make your second listen game to game NHL. It's every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. It's on the Locked On NHL feed, anywhere you get your podcasts. Have a great weekend, everyone.